In this video, video 2, we continue our read and commentary, Thunder, the Perfect Mind. In the first video, we outlined the general understanding of what's being said in this text, which is perfect mind is the receptacle, which we all have, that potential to line up to our authentic self. One way in which we can do that, which is outlined by what I think is Sophia, that is the author of this text, is to pay attention to the nature of this realm, get a knowledge of the tree of good and evil. Another way of saying the opposites, things like pain and suffering versus pleasure in healing, life versus death, cold versus hot. These all present to us the nature of opposites. Ultimately, the difference between these two bring about the potential for motion, the potential for power. And this is what's being talked about when we talk about the title of this text being the thunder. Thunder is the outcome of two opposites clashing and the release of great power. It's through this process that we're able to find ourselves if we but pay attention and not get caught up into the ideas of dogma or get run away by the luster of this world. Dogma being this idea that there is a set right and wrong, or the luster of this world being the illusion of this world is eternal in some way, when everything that's physical is a manifestation of the eternal spirit, but that physical self is always mutating, changing, and ultimately corruptible. Sophia presents to us her nature as it is projected from her perfect self in the pleroma into this conomic realm, which is an imperfect nature. That imperfect nature is what's called the dividing or the evening up of self, a kind of schizophrenia that we all experience when we come into this realm, when we forget ourselves. An eternal battle between the dark side and the light side. The dark side not necessarily being moralistically a bad thing, but only a quality different from the light, and that quality being all things that are not of God or of the pleroma or life, but then it being that thing called the not. That brings forth the challenge that's presented to every human being, dualistic, duplicitous self that's constantly trying to line up or to kind of tweak, get an understanding of the struggle between the voices outside telling us who we should be and what we are versus the voice within. If we but line up and listen to that quiet self and get those Gnostic moments, and then also pay attention to the outer world beyond your immediate self. Pay attention to the cycles, the signs, how things work in this universe to get the wisdom. And with these two, you're able to maneuver and see these things as merely not right and wrong or a moralistic kind of hierarchical structure, but rather a essence of being, a way of things. And then you gain wisdom in understanding the way things work. You get a understanding of the hermeneutical principles, if you will, or the spiritual laws. Then you have that extra benefit that is going to help you in finding authentic self and bringing forth the seed within the accomplishment and fulfilling the dreams, fulfilling self, and fulfilling your mission or message that you're leaving behind here on this realm, and therefore going to the higher realms. This is what Sophia is presenting, bipolar nature of this extreme opposite potential that brings forth free will. On the one hand, she can be extremely cruel, but on the other hand, she can be compassionate and healing, very caring and loving and tender. It isn't that she is these things, but it's that she's outlining her rushing toward the Father and creating the anomaly, bring forth this part of what is her being projected into this realm. So that misunderstanding, missing the mark of understanding, is what results in this realm. But it also brings forth free will. So it's quite paradoxical and complex, but this is what we have. And so let's continue where we left when she talked about at the end, I am one you hide from and you appear to me. When you hide, I show. When you appear, I hide. When you appear is suggesting When you're able to see who you are and you line up with that authentic self, then the wrath of Sophia no longer needs to visit you, or will be less likely to visit you and less likely to need to appear to you, because you are self-sufficient. You have found self. Therein you will become gifted instead of being cursed, because when you aren't lining up with authentic self, you may get the illusion you're getting something from that, whether it be a promotion or your peers like you, or the pastor lets you keep coming to the church, or they don't ostracize you or throw you out or exile you, or your parents don't kick you out of the home. Whatever it happens to be, you line up with the deformed, unauthentic, artificial idea about who you're supposed to be. Then you suffer, ultimately. It may appear you're getting something from it because you're getting the praise, but ultimately that praise leads to a kind of hollowness and an emptiness, because that's not where true happiness comes from. It comes from fulfilling the seed within. So that's what she's talking about here. When you appear, she then hides. But for those that are not appearing to themselves, they are as though they're invisible people, they're not truly themselves, she visits. As it says prior, I am one you hide from, and you appear to me. When you hide, I show. When you appear, I hide, ... Okay, let's continue our reading commentary from there. Take me into understanding from grief. She's saying, instead of focusing on the horribleness and the bitterness and the suffering and the pain of grief, although she's not suggesting that you not go through that cathartic, necessary experience, she's also suggesting that beneath that, you can gain wisdom. Take understanding from grief. And take me from understanding and grief. It may sound like these two are saying the same thing, but they're not. They're saying different things. Take me into understanding from grief. So take yourself from grief into understanding, and try to understand, why is grief even exist in the first place? Now the second part, and take me from understanding and grief. One is take you into understanding from grief, and the other is take me from understanding and grief. When you get understanding, you are then ultimately going to heal from grief. Understanding and grief come together in relief from grief. You can't have grief without understanding and then expect relief. That's what I'm getting here. Receive me into yourselves from other places. So in other words, keep an open mind. Allow yourself to have many experiences, and those new experiences will bring new sides of Sophia to you, which include places ugly and even destroyed, and still from the good, even in their ugliness. So in all things, there is a hidden gift here. A good example of this is not only gaining wisdom from the dark things of life, but also the beauty. If you think about people that are typically on the creative side of life, much of their creativity comes from their own pain and suffering and tribulations they've had to endure. And often the more that they've had to endure, the more beautiful their potential to create art becomes. You can see that in many stories and movies and books, and the more that the main character or the protagonist goes through trials and tribulations and then comes out triumphant, the more we champion that character in the story, and the more that we relate to the character in the story, and the more that we feel the essence of what they've gone through. Out of shame, take me to yourselves shameless. This is an interesting one, because it is through this understanding of shame we come to see it's useless. So shameless, because ultimately shame comes as guilt of that we're not lining up to this preconceived notion that others think we should have about who we are, or how we should behave, or how we should act. But Sophia is saying, no, out of that shame, take me to yourselves shameless. Without shame and with shame, rebuke what is mine in you, and come to me, you who know me, and you who know my members, and make great ones among small first creatures. So this sort of idea about ascendancy and transcendency, the very grandeur of that process brings about greatness. You see, this is kind of what she's saying, this idea of rising up without shame and with shame. Rebuke what is mine in you. So in other words, even with Sophia, that shouldn't matter to you. You have your own voice. Come to me, you who know me, and you who know my members, and make great ones among small first creatures. She's allowing herself to be kind of like the mother that you suckle on the milk from, right? Like, instead of allowing people to beat you up with shame, and you're low for it, and you're small, and you're no good, and, trample over you, and turn you into powder and dust, and you blow away and become insignificant, she's saying the opposite. Take from that as you would milk. Drink on the milk of what people are saying about you. and use that because it's a kind of food. It's a milk, right? It provides a kind of nutrient that then ultimately is going to allow you to go from among first creatures small to become a great one, because then you're able to overcome and have endurance. Come to childhood and don't despise it, because it is small and tiny. So now she's given an example that how great there is potential in that small child. It's small but tiny, but yet it has so much potential. And so when people trodden us down, they make us into a child, and we become innocent. Don't turn away the great in parts from the small, for the small is known from the great. Why do you curse and honor me? You wound me and have mercy. She's saying here, why do you curse and also honor me? It's another way of saying, well, when Christ talks about revelation, when you get judged by the demiurge god of this world, and the demiurge judges them, and then the people go to Christ and say, can you vouch for us? And Christ says, go away from me, you workers of iniquity. I've never known you, because you see, you only spoke of me in word, but not from your heart, not in authenticity. So here's the same. Why do you curse and honor me? In other words, you pretend like you're honoring me by, Jesus this and Jesus that, but then you judge people, you exile them and ostracize them and push them out of the church, or you create laws that cause their life filled with suffering, or even lead that to death, even perhaps. So this is what you do. You create all this because you're trying to one-up other people about how well can I line up my cherry-picked version of the Bible. And then you pretend like you're honoring Christ and God. But in reality, you're cursing the very message of the Christ and the very message of Sophia. Sophia is describing the nature of this realm and how she's taken responsibility for it. But she's not suggesting that she is these things, but rather that the anomaly that she brought about these things. You wound me and have mercy. Don't separate me from the first you have known. So in other words, don't fool yourself into understanding human nature is complex. This idea that you're trying to seek out perfection through dogma or moralistic laws or man-written laws or quote-unquote spiritual laws is not attainable. You can't separate your very nature. You are made up of both dark and light, whether you like it or not. And your goal is not to run away from the dark or just totally try to bathe yourself in light until you're just sparkly clean, but it's instead to use the light to form the dark, to take the dark, to define yourself, much like you would make a drawing and you color in the coloring book within the lines. That darkness is there to help you define your will and your ultimate accomplishment. It isn't there to use against other people, to judge them and set limitations on others, but it's to set limitations on yourself based on you clarifying every day what truly is authentically you. Don't separate me from the first you have known, and that first that you have known is the darkness. Don't cast out or turn away. Turn away and not know. I know the first ones, and those after them know me. I am perfect mind and rest. Perfect mind is full mind. That's what it means to be perfect. It means to be full. It means to be full in understanding. And the full understanding is that we all are completely made of both dark and light in everything we are, physically, soul-wise, and spiritually, mentally, emotionally, everything. We all have the ability to think the most darkest thoughts. We all have the ability to have the most elevated thoughts. But ultimately, it isn't that we have those thoughts that matters, but it is that those thoughts allow us complete free will. It is what we do with those thoughts that bring us to, that understanding that it's okay to be what we are brings us to rest. You see, I am perfect mind and rest. I am the knowledge of my search, the finding of those who look for me. It's another way of saying that we will notice the things that we search out. And those things that we don't search out, we won't notice them. So we're going to find. It's similar to when Christ says, knock and the door will be open. To ask and you shall receive. We can't take these things in a literal sense. We have to take them in a metaphorical, metaphysical way. Because it's all alchemy here. It's alchemical. It's not, don't want to take these literally. And that's what's gotten humanity into trouble when they read spiritual texts, is they take them literally. And those literal understandings that they take then turn into dogma and get calcified. As it says in the canonical text, that the letter of the law kills and the spirit enlivens. So if you're going to try to adhere to the exact letter of the law, you're basically going to kill the spirit. I am the knowledge of my search. Whatever you seek out, that is where you will get knowledge. The finding of those who look for me. Others that are looking for you is the finding of those who look for me. The finding of those who look for me. other people will find whatever value they're going to find in you, is really what she's saying here. So it's another way of saying, don't worry about what other people are thinking, because they're going to think what they're going to think. They're going to find whatever they want to find in you. The command of those who ask about me, you could think of as another way of saying, if people are asking about you, is because they want an answer. And they want an answer because they need something definitive. Something definitive is a kind of command, because they need some type of definition. Here you can see everything is saying, don't worry about what other people are doing, even if they're talking about you, even if they're inquiring about you, and you're the talk of the town, because they're going to do what they're going to do. This is about their own findings, their own journey, their own insecurities, whatever it is. The power of powers in my knowledge of angels sent at my word, and of gods in their seasons sent by my counsel, and of spirits of all who exist with me, and of women who live in me. So you've got that power, that through your knowledge, you have access to the powers of the angels. They're going to come at your command. Of gods in their seasons sent by my counsel, and of spirits of all who exist with me, of women who live in me. And those women not just only live in the female, but also in the male. It's talked about both men and women. Spiritual nature of the feminine has the understanding of how to form and to shape. That too exists in you. I am one who is honored, praised, and scornfully despised. See, this is what you want to be able to come to peace with this. You will never have a day where you will be honored by everybody or praised by everybody. You want to find rest. And in finding rest, you find the perfect mind. In finding the perfect mind, you find rest. Knowing that the world is always going to look at you contrary. On one hand, many are going to praise you and honor you. On the other hand, just as many are going to scorn and despise you. And then sometimes far more are going to scorn and despise you. And then other times, perhaps the pendulum will swing the other way and will favor you. I am peace, and war has come because of me. If you think that you aren't also responsible for war, then you're misunderstanding. Because every indiscretion, every lack of something that humanity is facing is a result of us collectively. If there's poverty, if there's misunderstanding, if there's ignorance, there's destitution, there's war, we all are jointly responsible. And so too, we are responsible to whether or not there will be peace. I am alien and citizen. And see, that also was what you want to understand. In this realm, there will always be demarcations. This country, this nation, that state, this county. You're an alien here, an immigration here. You're hated here, but you're loved over here. You're superior over here, but you're inferior there. I am the substance and one without substance. And this is the truest thing that can be said, because remember, we are both Gnostic, spiritually, soul-wise, physically. But also, for many, we are substantive and meaningful, but for others, we are insignificant and don't exist. Those unconnected to me are unfamiliar with me. This is wisdom, Sophia. And those in my substance know me. So those that are substantial to Sophia, a part of the wisdom, they are privy to this wisdom. Those close to me are ignorant of me, and those far away have known me. So this is a kind of interesting riddle here, right? Like, how could this possibly be? Because on the one hand, she invites you to come toward her, and she's inviting you to understand me and get to know me. And by so doing, you'll gain more knowledge. But on the other hand, if you get too close to her, then you go into ignorance. Well, why is this? Like, what is this kind of paradox? And it's, again, you can see this in the very nature of everything that exists. It's like turning the water on when you're making something. There's a precise recipe. It has to be exactly 130 degrees. If you have it too hot or too cold, then you burn it and you don't get the exact recipe right. It's the same thing with wisdom. And wisdom is different for everything. Sometimes it's wise to do something a certain way in a certain context. But if you apply that same kind of wisdom to a different context, it would be considered unwise. So those close to me are ignorant of me. So in other words, you can't get caught up. This is about dogma again. It's going back to dogma. If you get this idea that you finally figured it all out, you put her under a microscope and you think you're going to be able to finally get Sophia. You're going to finally understand wisdom. Or you're going to take a telescope and you're going to be able to see the grand universe and you finally get all the answers. Well, then you're ignorant. It's never going to happen. Because if that would happen, the entire apparatus would totally collapse. And the reason that is again, it is going into the confrontation. The confrontation always must exist, because without it, there's no acceleration. Then we become stagnant. There's nothing to move toward. And so God is no longer out there, and there's no curiosity, and there's no longing, and there's nothing new to do, and there's nothing new to create, nothing new to build. And so you can never arrive at an absolute about absolutely everything. Now you can arrive at absolutes about certain things at certain times, and you want to do that because you want certainty about what you're doing at certain points in time. But you can never arrive at an absolute in an absolute sense. If you have this idea that you absolutely know everything, and there's an absolute set of laws and rules you're supposed to adhere to, and everybody has to follow exactly like I follow it and understand it, then you're ignorant. So this is when you're too close to what you think you know the truth is. But on the other hand, if you step back and you take a much further view, a much more wide view angle of it, and you sort of open your mind, and you allow yourself to just have a faraway understanding. You don't see the details, but you just have a general understanding of it. Then you have come to know Sophia. You've come to know wisdom. On the day I am close to you, you are far. And on the day I am far, I am close to you. And again, it goes back resounding to what was said when we opened this video, when she talked about, whenever you come to know me, I disappear. But those that are ignorant of me, I appear to. It's the same kind of message here about how it really is going to come down. She's going to come to those in need of me. And it's not just to come to console you. Sometimes it's there to come to show you cruelty, so that you learn what it is that you're doing that is persecuting yourself. It isn't Sophia doing it, but it's her visiting her karma onto you. So it comes to visit you, to appear to you. I am within. So when she says I am within, same thing Christ said. Christ within, the hope of glory. That's where your hope resides. I am of natures. So she's not just nature, but she's of natures, suggesting, many planets, many universes, many different dimensions that may have many different ways that those environs are governed. I am of created spirits. So created spirits versus emanated spirits. She is the essence of why the archons came about, and the demons came about, and the demiurge came about. Why we got in touch with our spiritual self, and the request of souls. I am control and the uncontrollable. I am union and dissolution. I abide and dissolve. I am below, and they come up to me. I am judgment and acquittal. I am sinless, and the root of sin comes from me. Now notice she said she's sinless. And remember, she's within us, so therefore she is us, and we are her. So therefore you also are sinless. However, the root of sin comes from us. So what does that mean? It means sin is not something within you. It is something you do. So it doesn't make you sinful, but it makes your behavior sinful. In other words, your behavior is something you're acting out of ignorance. You're missing the mark of understanding. It isn't moralistic. That sin is not talking about morality, but it's talking about alchemy, talking about misunderstanding how these two work together. Maybe you're too hot or too cold. You're not harmonizing these properly. It's causing you suffering or causing others suffering. And I'm going to make a point here in a moment about something may pop up in many people's minds, because when we read through this, we get a kind of dualistic nature, purposely so, I think Sophia is setting out here, about the Christ nature, but also what sounds almost like the Old Testament God, right? But we're going to resolve that here in a minute, and we close out on this book. And it's quite astounding, but we're going to get to it. And she's pointing at it here. She's closing it out with this concern. She says, I am judgment and acquittal. I am sinless. Here's the key point here. She's closing out. And the root of sin comes from me. I am lust outwardly, yet within me is control. See, all these things that we're doing, they're merely outward manifestations of misunderstanding, ignorance. They're outward. We have the knowledge within. Gnosis is dormant. That's why we say on this channel, Gnosis is within everybody. Everybody has an equal amount of... The spiritual self is eternal. You see, it is infinitely large and infinitely small. It fits in everything. It's not possible to fit it into one complete small nothing, anything. So it's a paradox. But ultimately, that is the nature of who you really are. And that is flawless. It's perfect. And it's in total control. Not control as in a domineering sense, but as in managing it in a very healthy way. But the outside world is what distracts us, you see, and it causes us to then stray from that inner self, the inner knowing. And then we start to lust toward the outside. We start to behave in ignorance, and then we miss the mark of understanding, and therefore manifest behaviors of that misunderstanding, which is behaviors of sin. Not in a moralistic sense, I remind you again, but in a behavioral sense, an alchemical sense. I am hearing from all, and my speech is indecipherable. And that's true, right? We know it from a kind of waking sleep, a waking dream. We know the wisdom, but we can't fully articulate it. I am unspeakable, mute, and enormous in many words. Hear me in gentleness and discover me in roughness. I am the woman crying out and cast upon the face of the earth. I prepare the bread in my mind within. Now, here is so important to understand, because so much of history has been dominated by the patriarchy and sort of diminishing women as having any significant role. They're supposed to be subservient to the man. They're stupid, they're ignorant, they're smaller, they're insignificant. They're supposed to worship the man, supposed to answer the man. But here Sophia is presenting something different. She's saying, I have something to present to you. This idea of evil is nothing moralistically bad, but merely it's the opposite of that which is. It's the not. It's where the confrontation lies. It's what allows for motion. It's what allows for free will. But it doesn't then therefore mean it justifies all of the suffering. That's not what's being suggested. It's saying this is the nature of what the father-mother allowed Sophia to experience, because what she wanted to fully gain her worthiness to receive the father-mother's love. She wanted to, in other words, love the father-mother back by showing, I will go to the greatest pains in order to show you how much I appreciate what you've given me. You've given me life. You've given me love. You've given me potential to become something beautiful. And so in turn, I want to show you I deserve this. And so this is what we're all doing. I want to be able to present something back. I want to give you something back. And so we're giving something back to ourselves, because God is within, you see. And so this is what's this is going on. And the woman is that part of herself that is allowing that to take shape. The agony, the womb, the pregnancy, the childbirth, the crying out, the pain. This is the whole thing. This is the story of the Sophia mythology. She says, I am the woman crying out and cast upon the face of the earth. She's been pushed down. I prepare bread and mind within. See, she's behind the scenes orchestrating and slowly kind of massaging the bread. And this is really the essence of what's nurturing the juices of life, the milk of life, that is causing everything to be even have the potential to have energy and stamina and life. I am the knowledge of my name. I am the one who cries out, and I listen. She could hear her own crying out in the wilderness. You remember that in Revelation when it talks about in the wilderness for so many days, and 1,260 days. She was in the wilderness, lost, crying out in the wilderness, hearing her own voice. I appear, because she's hearing her own wailing about what she's done. She's created this grand suffering, but also in that there's this grand beauty. I appear and walk in. I am the defense. I call truth and inequity. You honor me and whisper against me. You, the vanquished, judge those who vanquish you before they judge you. You judge those who vanquish you before they judge you. It's interesting because, again, it's sort of that law of attraction. You know, if someone's coming to judge you, it's because you in some way are using that person to be a start part of your story, because you're wanting to create an antagonist to your story, because you have a plot, a message at the end, a theme, a story that you're leaving behind from that story. It's coming from this interplay between the opposites, the protagonist and the antagonist. So if someone's come to vanquish you, then there is a suggestion here. If they're coming to judge you, judge those who vanquish you before they judge you. So you have first judged them in your story as being the antagonist, and then they come to judge you, then are part of the story, enriches your message. Because in you, the judge, impartiality exists. If you are condemned by one, who will acquit you? If acquitted by him, who will arrest you? What is in you is outside, and one who fashions you on the outside shapes you inside. See, this is written over 2,000 years ago, right? It's so psychological. It's like beyond quite phenomenal. These truths are just, what is this, maybe 2 pages? But this is going to give you all the wisdom you need to be mentally and emotionally sound, psychologically sound, and get through this world that we're living in, this crazy world we live in, this crazy economic realm we live in. It's going to help you understand, okay, now I get it. Everybody's a part of my story, and I've called them to me so that I can sharpen my story, so I can sharpen my message, so I can make my story into a grand opus that resounds like thunder for all time, and help everybody become the perfect mind. What you see outside, you see within you. It is visible and your garment. Hear me, hearers, and find out about my words, you who know me. I am the hearing all can reach. I am speech indecipherable. I am the name of the sound, and the sound of the name. I am the sign of the letter and the designation of the division. This is where you get the word divine. Divinity and divine are two different words. Divinity is separation of the opposites and how we take those two to make something, like the dividing of the cell. And this is going to create more life. And so these two opposites is the basic alchemical foundation ingredients of everything you're going to need to create whatever you want to create while you're here. That's the division. The divinity is becoming divine is when you take that division and you're able to create unity. So these two words, divide and unity, put them together, you get divinity. That's a different thing. You don't want to create division. You want to become divine. You want to create divinity, not division. Division is there for you as a tool to bring something together and then create something from that or emanate something from that. So that's the difference already from Sophia versus the Old Testament God. The Old Testament God is there to create division. Sophia is merely allowing yourself to be a body for you so that you have a set of tools you can create from these opposites, which then allows for free will. The Old Testament God is there to be tyrannical and authoritarian and to take free will from you. You do as I say or else. And you have no allowance for knowledge, and nor do you have access to the tree of life. And let me crucify the Son of God while I'm at it. I, light, great power, will not move the name. So what is the name, and why is she not there to move it? So she is that light, and it's a great power, but she's not going to move the name. Why? Because you're the one to do it. I, light, great power, will not move the name, to the one who created me. I will speak his name. You are going to be the one to do that with the Father and the Mother that's going to manifest it for you. It's going to emanate that for you. All your job is to care and cultivate and to take the ingredients and to set it into motion. Have the allowance for the gifts to be brought forth and the outcome to be brought forth from the Father, Mother. Look at his words and all the writings completed. Be alert, hearers and angels and those sent and you spirits arisen from the dead. I alone exist and have no one to judge me. Many pleasures exist and many sins, uncontrolled passions and disgraceful desires, and brief pleasures embraced by people until they sober up and float up to their place of rest. She has great comfort and great confidence that everybody's eventually going to get there. Everybody has to go through this, all these disgraceful, what are these disgraceful desires? Well, these things that ultimately are going to bring us down, this lust that's going to really bring you down to the seedy parts of life. Brief pleasures that people embrace. Everything's always fleeting, is it not? Uncontrolled sins. What are those? Well, those are uncontrolled passions, or many pleasures exist in many sins. Well, again, sins from the lens of what Gnostics understand, which is the missing the mark of understanding, missing the understanding of everything she's saying here. How this isn't about morals. This is about using alchemy, understanding how alchemy works, how the universe works, and just not judging it, but simply really using it toward divinity, toward becoming divine, but not creating division, rather bringing something together to create something, or bring something into life. Then ultimately she says, there they will find me and live, and they will not die again. And that's where it ends. So it is through all of this, she says, that ultimately she is found. It's the very opposite. Jehovah God is trying to tell you the opposite. He said, I only exist where you aren't immersing yourself through this process. I don't want you to go through that process. I want to control you. You're not allowed to do anything. The moment you do, I'm going to zap you out of existence or throw you into hellfire, however you want to believe. But if you do exactly what I say, I'm going to give you all these gifts or give you power and little stars and stripes on your lapel, and you'll be able to be up here with us big guys on the hierarchy, the top of the hierarchy chain. It's like a food chain. That's the Jehovah God. Very different from Sophia. So don't get them too mixed up. They're not the same. Now, on first reading, that's what you get. And you might even bring out an Old Testament scripture that says something like, oh, well, Jehovah God says something like this. But you understand the intention of the context of what Jehovah God is saying is very different from what Sophia is saying. Sophia is talking about allowance. She's literally asking you, begging you to allow your mind to be open to having an understanding through engagement with life itself. And just accept that it is filled with uncontrolled passions, disgraceful desires, and brief pleasures. But eventually, I trust you're going to sober up and float up to their place of rest. There, they will find me and live. See, you're going to live. You're going to find her through allowing yourself having a very rich experience. But again, you want to be able to be wise and gnosis. Think about what's going going to promote life and well-being and health. Don't think about morality. That's never going to do anything for you but bring shame and guilt. And that creates division and enmity and suffering and death, ultimately. Remember, the wages of sin is death. If we have a mindset of sin, then we're going to eventually lead to suffering, division, and death. But if we're mindful of the perfect mind, which is a full mind, a full understanding of the way things actually are in this universe, not some sort of like scaled down version of how somebody wants it to be, so they have control over you, then you have the perfect mind and you're at rest. And you become empowered, and this is the thunder, and your voice will resound, and the true authentic self and accomplishments will come forth, and therefore you release from this realm, the Kanoma realm. And then eventually, from there, you begin the journey of extended life, and eventually eternal life. There it is. Quite an incredible book, jam-packed in just a couple pages. So that's the end of this text. I believe we're at the end of Codex VI as well. So we're going to pick back up on the next video. We'll talk again soon. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, have a blessed day.